The Calvaxian Empire had ruled the southern spiral arm of the galaxy for 3,000 years. Their ships were the finest in known space, their weapons the most advanced, their military tradition the most respected. When Ambassador Theron received the message that humanity wished to join the Galactic Council, he felt a mixture of curiosity and mild amusement. Another young species, barely a century into space travel, seeking to sit among the great powers. He had seen dozens of such requests in his long career. Most ended with the applicant species accepting a minor role, understanding their place in the grand order of things. The meeting was scheduled to take place at the neutral station of Pinnacle 7, a massive construct that floated between three star systems. It was designed specifically for diplomatic gatherings, with docking bays large enough to accommodate the grandest vessels of any council race. Theron decided that this would be an excellent opportunity to remind these newcomers of the natural hierarchy. He sent word throughout the Empire. The finest ships of the fleet would accompany him to this meeting. Let the humans see what real power looked like. The Calvaxian delegation arrived first, as was proper. Theron's flagship, the Eternal Dominion, was a sight that had made entire civilizations reconsider acts of aggression. It stretched for 12 kilometers, its hull adorned with the precious metal Xandrium, which gleamed like captured starlight. The ship's weapons arrays could level continents. Its shields had never been breached in battle. Around it hung 27 other vessels, each one a masterpiece of military engineering, each one capable of conquering a star system single-handedly. The other council races arrived in due course. The Velprin brought their organic ships, grown rather than built, pulsing with bioluminescence. The Ket arrived in their geometric constructs, perfect cubes and pyramids that seemed to mock conventional physics. The insectoid chorus came in their hive ships, massive and strange. Each delegation brought their finest, but none could match the sheer, intimidating presence of the Calvaxian fleet. Theron felt a deep satisfaction as he watched the other ambassadors arrive. Order was being maintained. The hierarchy was clear. The humans were late. This was noted by everyone. In galactic diplomacy, arrival time sent a message. To arrive early showed eagerness, perhaps desperation. To arrive precisely on time showed professionalism. To arrive late was either a sign of disorganization or a deliberate insult. Theron suspected the former. Young species often struggled with the complexities of interstellar coordination. "Any word from the human delegation?" asked Theron's second-in-command, a younger Calvaxian named Soren, who had distinguished himself in the border conflicts with the Ket. "Their last transmission placed them 6 hours out," Theron replied. "They apologized for the delay, something about recalibrating their jump drives." He waved a hand dismissively. Typical for a species still learning to navigate the deeper currents of space. The waiting parties gathered in the grand observation hall of Pinnacle 7. Through the enormous transparent dome, they could see the assembled fleets, each one representing centuries or even millennia of advancement and tradition. Diplomats mingled, speaking in the common tongue that had been developed specifically for council business. The mood was one of casual superiority, especially among the Calvaxians. Several of them had begun taking bets on how primitive the human ships would look. "I wager they still use chemical propulsion," said one Calvaxian officer, her voice dripping with amusement. "Impossible," countered another. "They couldn't have reached Pinnacle 7 without at least basic fusion drives. I say they have fusion drives, but no shielding worth mentioning." Theron listened to these conversations without comment. He had reviewed the limited intelligence available on humanity. They were from a world they called Earth, a pleasant enough planet by all accounts. They had achieved faster-than-light travel only 60 years ago, an impressive pace of development, admittedly. They had established colonies on a dozen worlds. They had fought no wars since leaving their home system, which could indicate either peacefulness or simple lack of opportunity. Their diplomatic messages had been polite, formal, and entirely unremarkable. What puzzled Theron was the complete absence of any information about their military. The humans had provided detailed cultural exchanges, scientific papers, and economic data, but when it came to their defense forces, there was nothing but the vaguest generalities. When pressed, the human diplomatic attaché had simply said that all would be revealed at the meeting. Theron had interpreted this as embarrassment. They probably had a few patrol boats and didn't want to admit it. The 6-hour wait stretched on. Some delegations retired to their ships. Others continued socializing. The Velprin ambassador, a wise old creature named Moss Who Remembers, approached Theron with a thoughtful expression. "You seem very certain of how this will proceed," Moss Who Remembers said, his voice like wind through leaves. "Am I wrong to be?" Theron replied. "They are children in a galaxy of ancients. Better they understand that immediately." "Perhaps," the Velprin said slowly, "but I have made a study of emerging species. It is my hobby, you might say. I have reviewed every scrap of information about these humans." "And what have you concluded?" "That they are very, very careful about what they reveal." Moss Who Remembers gestured toward the assembled ships with one of his many limbs. "Every species here arrive with their pride on display, ships that represent our finest achievements, our messages to our own people. But humans? They show us art and music and stories. They show us science and philosophy. They show us everything except the one thing that matters most in this chamber: capacity for violence." Theron felt a flicker of unease but pushed it aside. "You suggest they are hiding something?" "I suggest nothing. I merely observe." Moss Who Remembers drifted away, leaving Theron alone with his thoughts. The warning came suddenly. "Multiple jump signatures detected," announced the station's automated systems. "Human fleet emerging from hyperspace." Every being in the observation hall moved to the windows. Even the most dignified ambassadors could not hide their curiosity. This was the moment. The humans would arrive in whatever collection of ships they had cobbled together. They would see the might arrayed before them, and they would understand their place in the order of things. The first ship appeared at the edge of sensor range, then the second, then the third, and fourth, and fifth. The numbers kept climbing. 10 ships, 20, 50, 100. The displays showed more signatures incoming. 200 ships, 300, 500. "There must be an error," Soren said, his voice uncertain. "The sensors are malfunctioning." But the sensors were not malfunctioning. Through the observation windows, the assembled diplomats watched in absolute silence as the human fleet materialized. They came in perfect formation, emerging from hyperspace with a precision that spoke of countless hours of practice. Each ship was dark gray, almost black, with minimal external features. No decorative metals, no artistic flourishes. They were purely functional, and there were so many of them. 947 vessels, reported the station sensors. All human registry, all military designation. Theron felt his throat go dry. 947 ships. The entire Calvaxian escort fleet numbered 28. The humans had brought a force 30 times larger to a diplomatic meeting, and they were still coming. More jump signatures lit up the display, larger ones this time. The super capitals emerged last, 5 of them, each one absolutely massive. They dwarfed even the Eternal Dominion. The largest of them was easily 20 kilometers long, a titan of metal and purpose. Unlike the smaller ships, these did have names visible on their hulls, written in both human script and the common tongue. Theron read the name of the largest vessel with growing disbelief. UWNS, Unbroken. Around him, the observation hall had erupted into chaos. Diplomats were shouting into communication devices. Military officers were demanding information. The Ket ambassador had gone completely silent, its geometric thought patterns clearly overwhelmed by what it was seeing. Even the usually composed chorus ambassador seemed agitated, its constituent members buzzing frantically among themselves. They brought a war fleet, Soren whispered. To a diplomatic meeting, they brought an entire war fleet. But Theron was beginning to understand something that chilled him more than the numbers. He thought back to what Moss Who Remembers had said. Careful about what they reveal. This wasn't a show of force born from insecurity. This wasn't a young species trying to overcompensate. This was a message, carefully calculated and precisely delivered. The humans had known exactly what they would find here. They had known the Calvaxians would bring their finest ships. They had known every delegation would arrive with pride and power on display, and they had planned their response accordingly. Open a channel to the human flagship, Theron ordered. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. I would speak with whoever commands this fleet. The communication officer worked quickly. Within moments, a holographic display activated, showing the face of a human female. She wore a simple uniform, dark blue with minimal decoration. Her hair was pulled back severely, and her eyes were calm, measuring. She looked like someone who had seen battle and survived it. She looked like someone who had made difficult decisions and lived with them. Ambassador Theron, she said, her voice perfectly polite. I am Admiral Chen of the United Worlds Naval Service. I apologize for our delayed arrival. Jump calculations for a fleet this size require extra precision. Admiral, Theron managed, that is quite the escort fleet. Escort fleet? Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Amusement, perhaps. Ambassador, this isn't an escort fleet. This is just the local patrol group for this sector. They were in the area, so I brought them along. She paused, letting that sink in. I hope we haven't caused any concern. We simply wanted to arrive properly prepared for discussions about humanity's potential council membership. Around Theron, every Calvaxian officer had gone completely still. Just a patrol group, sector patrol, not their fleet, not their military might. Just a local patrol that happened to be nearby. The implications crashed through Theron's mind like meteors through atmosphere. If this was a patrol group, what did their actual fleet look like? How many ships did they have? How many sectors did they patrol? How large was their territory that they needed patrols of 1,000 ships? The Admiral continued speaking, still in that perfectly reasonable tone. I understand that Council protocol requires military capability verification for new members. We're prepared to provide any demonstrations you'd like. We brought targeting drones, simulation equipment, whatever the Council requires. She smiled slightly. We want to be thorough. The eternal dominion, pride of the Calvaxian Empire, suddenly felt very small. The Council chamber aboard Pinnacle 7 had been designed to accommodate thousands of beings. Right now it felt cramped. Every delegate who had been present for the human fleet's arrival was packed into the space, along with countless aides, military advisors, and observers. The usual careful choreography of council meetings had been abandoned entirely. Everyone wanted to hear what the humans would say. Everyone wanted to understand what they were dealing with. Theron sat in his designated seat, still trying to process what had happened outside. The numbers wouldn't stop running through his mind. 947 combat vessels, 5 super capitals, a patrol group. His own intelligence services were already working frantically, trying to gather any additional information about human military capabilities. The preliminary reports were not comforting. Humanity controlled 73 star systems, each one with industrial capacity, each one with shipyards. If each system maintained patrol groups of similar size, and that was just for local security, then the total size of the human military was almost unthinkable. The human delegation entered the chamber last. They numbered only 12 individuals, led by an older man who introduced himself as Ambassador Chen, the Admiral's brother. He had the same calm eyes, the same measured way of moving. Behind him walked a mixture of humans, both male and female, of various ages and appearances. They wore civilian clothes, not uniforms. They carried data tablets in briefcases. They looked like any other diplomatic delegation Theron had ever seen, which somehow made them more unsettling. The contrast between their casual appearance and the military might floating outside was striking. Ambassador Chen approached the central podium and bowed slightly to the assembly. "Honored council members," he began, speaking in flawless common tongue. "Thank you for agreeing to hear humanity's petition for membership. We recognize that this is an important decision, one that requires careful consideration and understanding on all sides." The chief counselor, a ancient ket named Geometric Perfection, spoke from its hovering position. Its voice was translated by machines, coming out flat and emotionless. "The council recognizes humanity. Before we proceed with normal protocols, we have questions regarding your military display. The presence of such a large combat fleet at a diplomatic function is highly irregular." "We understand the concern," Chen replied smoothly. "However, council protocols specifically require military capability verification for species seeking membership. We reviewed the last 50 species admissions. In every case, the applying species was asked to demonstrate their ability to defend themselves and contribute to council security. In every case, this demonstration occurred after months or years of diplomatic back and forth. We thought we might expedite the process." There were murmurs throughout the chamber. The human had done his homework. He knew the procedures, knew the requirements, and had preemptively addressed them. It was clever. It was also a power play disguised as efficiency. Moss, who remembers, spoke next, his aged voice carrying across the chamber. "You claim the fleet outside is a routine patrol group. Please clarify this statement. What is the total extent of human military forces?" Chen smiled. It was not an unfriendly expression, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm afraid that exact numbers are classified, as I'm sure you understand. What I can tell you is that the United Worlds maintains sufficient forces to secure our territory and protect our citizens. The fleet you see outside represents standard sector defense capacity. We have 73 settled systems, each with its own security requirements." The math was simple enough for everyone to do. 73 systems. If each had similar patrol strength, that meant humanity potentially commanded a military of tens of thousands of ships. The silence in the chamber was profound. A chorus delegate spoke, its voice a harmony of dozens of individual members speaking in unison. "Why would a peaceful species require such extensive military development? You have no enemies. You have fought no wars beyond your own system. What threatens you that demands this level of preparation?" This was the question Theron had been waiting for. It was the heart of the matter. Young species did not build massive militaries without reason. They built them in response to threats, real or perceived. So what did humanity fear? Chen's expression became more serious. "Honored chorus, I will answer your question with complete honesty. We developed our military as a matter of philosophy, not in response to any specific threat. You see, we studied galactic history very carefully before venturing beyond our own system. We reviewed every record we could obtain. We studied the rise and fall of empires. We examined conflicts and alliances, and we noticed a disturbing pattern." He activated a holographic display showing a complex timeline of galactic events. Every species that entered the galactic community unprepared, every civilization that relied on others for protection, eventually found themselves in a subordinate position. Not always through conquest, sometimes through economic pressure, sometimes through political maneuvering, but the result was always the same. Weakness invited exploitation, even from otherwise friendly powers. Theron felt a flush of anger. The implication was clear and insulting. Chen was suggesting that the council itself was predatory, that it took advantage of weaker members. But Chen continued before anyone could object. "We mean no offense to the council or its members. We recognize that the galactic community has achieved remarkable peace and stability. We admire that achievement. We wish to be part of it. But we also believe that true peace comes from mutual respect, and respect comes from strength. We built our military not to threaten anyone, but to ensure that when we entered the galactic stage, we would be taken seriously as equals. And if the Council denies your application, as geometric perfection, then we will respectfully withdraw and continue developing independently, Chen replied without hesitation. We're not here to force our way in. We're here to offer partnership. But it will be partnership between equals, or it will not be at all. The chamber erupted into discussion. Some delegates were offended by human arrogance. Others were intrigued by their directness. The Calvaxian delegation was having a heated internal debate. Theron could hear fragments of it. Some of his officers wanted to treat this as a threat, to demand the human fleet withdraw immediately. Others argued for caution, pointing out that the humans had technically violated no laws and had in fact followed proper procedures. Theron raised his hand, calling for silence. When he had the chamber's attention, he spoke directly to Chen. You have made your point about strength and respect, but you have also created a situation where many in this chamber feel threatened. That is not a good foundation for partnership. What assurances can you provide that humanity's military power will not be used aggressively? Chen nodded, as if he had expected this question. A fair concern. Let me address it by sharing something most species don't reveal during initial contact. Our military philosophy isn't based on expansion or domination. It's based on a concept we call deterrence. The purpose of our fleet is to make the cost of aggression against humanity far greater than any potential benefit. We want to be powerful enough that no one ever considers attacking us in the first place. But such power could easily be turned outward, pressed a Velprin delegate. History shows that strong militaries eventually seek to use their strength. That's why we have strong civilian control of our military, Chen replied. Every admiral, every captain, every soldier answers to elected civilian leadership. Our military cannot act without approval from our government, and our government must answer to our people. Additionally, we have multiple independent oversight bodies, mandatory ethics training, and strict rules of engagement. He paused. We learn from history, both our own and others. We know the dangers of unchecked military power. We've built systems specifically to prevent those dangers from manifesting. Moss, who remembers, spoke again, his voice thoughtful. You paint a picture of a very controlled, very careful civilization. Yet you arrived here with overwhelming force. These two things seem contradictory. Chen actually laughed at that, a genuine sound. You're right to point out the contradiction. The truth is, we're still figuring out how to balance our security needs with diplomatic relationships. We're young as civilizations go. We make mistakes. Today might have been one of them. He looked around the chamber. When we planned this meeting, we thought showing our capabilities up front would save time and establish clear foundations for discussion. We didn't fully consider how it would appear, how it might be threatening rather than reassuring. We still have much to learn about galactic diplomacy. The admission was disarming. Throughout the chamber, Theron could see attitudes softening slightly. Acknowledging mistakes was a sign of maturity. It was also a very effective negotiating tactic, he noted cynically. The session continued for hours. The humans answered questions about their technology, their society, their goals. They provided data on their economic systems, their scientific achievements, their cultural values. They were thorough, patient, and remarkably well prepared. Every question that was asked, they had an answer ready. Not always the answer the questioner wanted, but always an answer that was logical and supported by evidence. As the session drew toward its conclusion, Theron found his opinion of humanity shifting. They were not the naive newcomers he had expected. They were also not aggressive warmongers. They were something more complex and more interesting. They were a species that had looked at the galaxy and decided to enter it on their own terms. They had built power before seeking partnership, specifically to avoid being junior partners. It was audacious. It was also, Theron had to admit, rather clever. The final question came from geometric perfection. Humanity has demonstrated military capacity far beyond what we anticipated. You have presented diplomatic credentials and cultural information. You have answered our questions, but I will ask you directly, what does humanity want from council membership? What is your goal here? Chen stood silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice was sincere. We want to learn. We want to participate in something larger than ourselves. We want access to the accumulated knowledge and wisdom of 100 species, thousands of years of experience. We want to trade, to share ideas, to build relationships. We want to contribute to galactic stability and progress. He paused. But we also want to maintain our independence and our values. We don't want to be absorbed into something that erases who we are. We want partnership that respects our sovereignty and our right to chart our own course. We will contribute our strength to the Council's security. We will share our discoveries and innovations. We will participate fully in the galactic community, but we will do so as ourselves, not as someone else's satellite state. The chamber fell silent again. It was a bold statement, but it was also honest. Theron found himself respecting that honesty, even as part of him bristled at the presumption. Who were these newcomers to dictate terms? But another part of him, the part that had studied history and politics for centuries, recognized something important. Humanity was offering genuine partnership. They were also making clear that partnership was the only relationship they would accept. Take it or leave it. The council would need time to deliberate, of course. Such a significant decision couldn't be made in a single session. But as the meeting adjourned and delegates began filing out, Theron noticed something interesting. The conversations happening around him had changed. Before the humans arrived, there had been condescension and dismissal. Now there was caution, yes, but also interest, respect, even if grudging. The humans had achieved their goal. They had made themselves impossible to ignore. Outside the station, the human fleet maintained its perfect formation, a dark constellation against the stars. 1,000 ships, each one representing humanity's determination to be taken seriously. Theron stared at them for a long time, thinking about what their presence meant for the future of the galaxy. The council deliberations took 3 days. During that time, the human fleet remained stationary, making no aggressive moves, but also not withdrawing. Admiral Chen had offered to move her ships further away if it would make the delegates more comfortable, but no one had taken her up on the offer. Everyone understood that the fleet's position was irrelevant. The point had been made. The humans were here, they were powerful, and they weren't going away. Theron spent those 3 days in intensive meetings with other Calvaxian delegates and military advisors. The debate within his own delegation was fierce. The traditional faction argued that humanity's display of force was an insult that demanded a firm response. The pragmatic faction countered that humanity's power was real and needed to be accommodated. The opportunistic faction saw potential allies who could shift the balance of power on the council. Everyone had an opinion, and none of them agreed. Theron's own position was complex. On one level, he was offended by human presumption. They had been in space for less than a century and already thought themselves equal to civilizations millennia old. On another level, he had to admit they had reason for their confidence. Military power was only one measure of a civilization's worth, but it was an important one. The humans had it in abundance. But what interested Theron most was the philosophy behind their power. Deterrence, Chen had called it. The idea of building strength not to conquer, but to prevent war. It was an interesting concept, though Theron suspected it was more complex in practice than in theory. Still, the humans seemed genuinely committed to it. Their military was enormous, but their actual behavior had been cautious and defensive. They had expanded slowly, consolidating each new system before moving to the next. They had avoided conflicts with minor species they encountered. They had spent decades observing the galactic community before making contact. These were not the actions of aggressive expansionists. Moss, who remembers, visited Theron on the second day. The old Velprin moved slowly, his many limbs working in careful coordination. He settled into a resting position near Theron's workspace and was silent for several minutes. Theron had learned long ago that Velprin communicated as much through silence as through words. He waited. Finally, Moss, who remembers, spoke. "I have been thinking about patterns. You know, I study such things. The rise and fall of civilizations, the cycles of history. I have lived long enough to see many cycles complete themselves." "And what pattern do you see here?" Theron asked. "Something that has not occurred in my lifetime, nor in the lifetimes of my ancestors for many generations back. A species has entered the galactic stage already mature. Not in culture, perhaps, not in wisdom, certainly, but in power and self-awareness, they are already adults. Most species we encounter are children, looking to the Council for guidance and protection. Humanity is different. They looked at the Council and saw not parents, but peers. They prepared themselves accordingly. You think we should accept their application?" "I think we have little choice," Moss, who remembers, said. "If we reject them, they will continue developing independently. In a century or two, they will be too powerful for anyone to challenge. Better to have them inside the Council, bound by its rules and traditions, than outside it, free to do as they wish." That sounds like fear talking. Perhaps, but is it wrong? Look at their fleet, Theron. Look at what they accomplished in mere decades. Imagine what they might do with centuries, millennia. Their potential is enormous. We can either help shape that potential or stand aside and hope they remain friendly. Theron had no answer to that. He had been having similar thoughts himself. The Council's decision came on the evening of the third day. The chamber was packed even fuller than before, with observers from dozens of species who had no official role but were intensely interested in the outcome. The human delegation entered quietly and took their seats. Ambassador Chen's expression revealed nothing. He could have been attending a routine trade negotiation for all the emotion he showed. Geometric perfection called the chamber to order. The Ket's crystalline form refracted light in complex patterns as it spoke. The Council has completed its deliberations regarding humanity's application for membership. This decision required extensive discussion and consideration of many factors. We have reviewed humanity's credentials, assessed their capabilities, and evaluated their stated intentions. Theron watched Chen carefully. Still nothing. The man could have been carved from stone. The other human delegates showed more nervous energy, small movements, and exchanged glances. But Chen was perfectly still. "The Council's decision is as follows," Geometric Perfection continued. "Humanity's application for full membership is accepted, contingent upon agreement to standard Council treaties and protocols. Additionally, given humanity's significant military capacity, we are establishing new provisions specific to their membership." Chen's expression flickered. Just for a moment, surprise crossed his face. Then it was gone, replaced by careful attention. "These provisions are as follows. First, humanity agrees to contribute forces to Council security operations on a scale proportional to their capacity. Second, humanity agrees to share military technology and tactical doctrine with Council defense coordinators. Third, humanity accepts observation and verification protocols to ensure their forces remain defensive in nature. Fourth, humanity agrees to participate in joint military exercises with other Council forces to build cooperation and understanding." The chamber buzzed with reaction. These were significant concessions being demanded. Theron saw several human delegates lean forward, clearly concerned. But Chen remained calm, listening carefully. "In exchange," Geometric Perfection said, "humanity receives immediate full member status with all associated rights and privileges. This includes voting rights in Council decisions, access to Council scientific and cultural exchanges, participation in council economic systems, and council protection under collective security agreements. Additionally, given humanity's expressed concerns about sovereignty, the Council confirms that membership does not require conformity to any specific governmental or social systems. Human independence and self-determination are guaranteed under Council Charter. Chen stood slowly. The Council's terms are acceptable. Humanity agrees to all provisions specified. We are honored to join the galactic community. And just like that, it was done. Humanity was a council member. The chamber erupted into discussion, some delegates celebrating, others expressing concern, everyone processing what this meant for the future. Theron sat back in his seat, feeling oddly drained. A major shift had just occurred in galactic politics. The balance of power had changed, and he had witnessed it firsthand. Later, as delegates mingled in the aftermath of the vote, Theron found himself standing next to Ambassador Chen. The human was sipping something from a small container, looking almost relaxed now that the formal proceedings were complete. "Congratulations," Theron said. "You achieved what you came for." "We did," Chen agreed, "though I'll admit those additional provisions were unexpected. Your council negotiated well. They got significant concessions from us." "Did they?" Theron asked. "You were already planning to share technology and participate in joint operations. You want integration with council forces. The provisions formalize what you intended anyway." Chen smiled. "True, but it lets the council feel like they extracted something. That's important for maintaining dignity and face. We're not here to humiliate anyone. We just wanted to be taken seriously." "Mission accomplished," Theron said dryly. "Though I hope you understand that many species will be watching humanity very carefully now. Trust takes time to build." "We understand. We're patient. We'll prove ourselves through actions, not just words." Chen paused, then asked, "May I ask you something, Ambassador?" "Of course. Why did you bring your finest ships to this meeting? You knew we were newcomers. You could have sent a simple escort. Why the show of force?" Theron considered lying, then decided against it. "Because I wanted to remind you of the established order. I wanted you to see the power of the Council and understand your place within it. I wanted to ensure you approach membership with proper humility. And instead, we showed up with overwhelming force of our own." "Yes," Chen nodded slowly. "I appreciate the honesty. And for what it's worth, I think we needed to see that. We needed to understand that the council powers are strong and proud. It helps us calibrate our own behavior. If you had arrived with just a small escort, we might have misjudged the situation. Your show of force told us to take this seriously, so we did." It was a generous interpretation, and Theron wasn't entirely sure he believed it, but it was also diplomatically smooth. The human was good at his job. Over the following weeks, the integration process began. Human liaisons were assigned to various council departments. Joint military exercises were scheduled. Technology sharing protocols were established. It was a massive undertaking, bringing a new species into the complex web of galactic civilization. But it proceeded smoothly, more smoothly than anyone had expected. Theron found himself working closely with human counterparts on security coordination. He had expected to find them brash or overconfident. Instead, they were professional, competent, and genuinely interested in learning council procedures. They asked intelligent questions. They listened to experienced officers. They were willing to admit when they didn't know something. It was almost disappointing how reasonable they were. The first joint exercise was scheduled for 3 months after humanity's admission. It would involve forces from 6 council species, including a Calvaxian battle group. The exercise would simulate a defense scenario against a hypothetical invasion force. The humans volunteered to play the role of defenders, with council forces acting as attackers. It was a good test of their claimed defensive capabilities. Theron commanded the Calvaxian portion of the attacking force. He took the exercise seriously, planning carefully and using his best tactics. He would push the humans hard to see how they really performed under pressure. The exercise would take place in an uninhabited system, using live weapons with reduced yields to minimize damage. It would be as close to real combat as possible without actual casualties. When the day came, Theron felt a mixture of anticipation and unease. He had reviewed human tactical doctrine as much as possible, but there were still many unknowns. How would they handle coordinated attacks? How would they respond to unexpected maneuvers? What surprises might they have prepared? The exercise began with the attacking forces entering the system at multiple points. Standard tactics called for spreading out to prevent the defenders from concentrating fire. Theron's battle group came in from the Galactic North, while Velprin and Ket forces entered from other vectors. The plan was to converge on the central planet, forcing the defenders to split their forces or abandon positions. The human defenders were already in position, their ships deployed in a loose grid throughout the system. It looked like a standard defensive formation, nothing remarkable. Theron ordered his ships to advance, using a rolling formation that would allow them to support each other while maintaining offensive pressure. The humans didn't engage immediately. They fell back, repositioning as the attackers advanced. Theron had expected this. It was textbook defensive doctrine. Trade space for time, force the enemy to extend their supply lines, then counterattack when they were stretched thin. He adjusted his approach, being careful not to overextend. What happened next took him completely by surprise. The human ships didn't just retreat, they repositioned into clusters, each cluster supporting the others in a network of overlapping fire zones. When Theron's forces entered these zones, they found themselves under attack from multiple angles simultaneously. The humans were using the entire system as a weapon, with ships positioned to create kill boxes that attackers couldn't avoid. Theron's tactical display showed rapidly mounting casualties as his simulated ships took damage from coordinated fire. He tried to adjust, to find weaknesses in the defensive network, but every time he repositioned, the humans shifted too, maintaining their advantageous positions. They were fighting as a single coordinated organism, not as individual ships. The level of coordination was extraordinary. The exercise lasted 6 hours. At the end, the attacking forces had failed to reach their objectives. The human defenders had held every important position while inflicting severe casualties on the attackers. Theron's battle group alone had lost 60% of its ships in the simulation. The actual council forces didn't perform much better. After the exercise, there was a debriefing session involving all participants. Admiral Chen presented the human tactical approach, explaining their philosophy of integrated defense and networked warfare. It was impressive and more than a little humbling. "Your tactics are effective," Theron admitted, "but they require incredible coordination. How do you achieve that level of communication across such large forces?" "Training," Admiral Chen replied simply. "We drill constantly. Every ship captain knows their role and how they fit into the larger picture. We also have robust communication systems and redundancies built into everything. If one node goes down, others compensate automatically." "It must take years to train crews to that level." "It does. Our military personnel spend more time training than they do on actual deployments. We believe that preparation prevents problems." Theron thought about his own forces. Calvaxian ships were individually superior to most opponents. Calvaxian officers were skilled and experienced, but they didn't train together with the intensity the humans clearly did. Each ship was a masterpiece, but they fought as individuals, not as a unified force. The humans had shown a different approach. They fought as a system, and the system was far more powerful than any individual component. Over the following months, Theron and the other council members learned more about humanity. They learned about human culture, with its strange combination of idealism and pragmatism. They learned about human history, with its long record of conflicts and hard-won peace. They learned about human philosophy, with its emphasis on individual rights balanced against collective responsibility. Most importantly, they learned that the humans had been planning their entrance onto the galactic stage for decades. From the moment they had detected the first signals from alien civilizations, they had been studying and preparing. They had learned galactic languages, studied galactic history, analyzed galactic power structures. By the time they made official contact, they knew more about the Council than most new members learned in years. This became clear during a private conversation Theron had with Ambassador Chen 6 months after humanity's admission. They were sharing a meal in one of Pinnacle 7's restaurants, discussing trade agreements. "You knew," Theron said suddenly, "that first meeting, when you arrived with your entire patrol group, you knew exactly how we would react. You knew we would bring our finest ships to intimidate you. You planned for it." Chen smiled slightly. "We had a pretty good idea, yes. We studied council admission protocols going back centuries. We noticed patterns. Strong species tended to flex their power during first contacts. It was a natural dominance display, so we prepared our own display. The whole thing was theater. The whole thing was communication," Chen corrected. "We were telling you who we are and how we see ourselves. You were doing the same. That's what first contacts are really about, establishing the basic relationship framework. And if we had rejected your application, then we would have continued developing independently, exactly as I said in the chamber. That wasn't a bluff. We wanted council membership, but we didn't need it. That's an important distinction." Chen paused. "Theron, can I be honest with you? Please." Humanity's biggest fear wasn't that we would be rejected. It was that we would be accepted as junior members, looked down upon, and taken advantage of. We've seen it happen to other species. They join the council, they're grateful for the opportunity, and gradually they become subordinate to stronger members. Their independence erodes. Their culture gets absorbed. We couldn't allow that to happen to us. So you built a military large enough to demand respect. Exactly. We wanted to arrive as equals from day one. Not equals in wisdom or experience, obviously, but equals in power and capacity. We wanted to contribute, not just benefit. We wanted to be partners, not clients. Theron absorbed this. "It's a dangerous approach. You could have triggered a conflict." "We considered that risk carefully. That's why we were so careful in our preparations. We made sure our approach was technically legal under council protocols. We made sure we weren't actually threatening anyone. We just made sure everyone knew we could defend ourselves. There's a difference between having power and threatening people with it." "A subtle difference," Theron observed, "but an important one." They finished their meal in companionable silence. As they were leaving, Theron asked one final question. "Your fleet outside the station that first day, you really could have fit more ships into that formation, couldn't you?" Chen's expression was carefully neutral. "That's classified information, Ambassador." Which was, Theron realized, an answer in itself. The humans had shown a fraction of their capability and called it a patrol group. The message was clear. Don't push us. We can defend ourselves and more, but we'd rather be friends. A year after humanity's admission to the Council, Theron attended a ceremony on Earth. He was part of a delegation visiting humanity's homeworld to strengthen cultural ties. The ceremony was held in a city called Geneva, apparently significant in human history. It marked the formal ratification of various treaties and agreements between humanity and the Council. It was largely symbolic, but symbols mattered in diplomacy. Earth was beautiful. Theron had visited hundreds of worlds, but there was something special about humanity's birthplace. It was incredibly diverse, with climates ranging from frozen poles to tropical equators. The humans had damaged their planet severely during their industrial development, but had spent the last century healing it. Signs of recovery were visible everywhere. It was impressive dedication to their homeworld. During the ceremony, several speeches were given by both human and alien dignitaries. Most were the usual diplomatic platitudes, but one speech stood out. It was given by an elderly human woman who had been one of humanity's first astronauts, who had been part of the initial missions beyond their home system. "We were very small when we first looked up at the stars," she said, her voice trembling slightly with age, but still strong. "We saw vastness and mystery. We saw wonder and danger. We knew we were just beginning a journey that would change us forever." She paused, looking at the assembled aliens. "We are still very small. We are still very young, but we are no longer alone. We have found brothers and sisters among the stars. We have found teachers and partners. We have found challenges and opportunities, and we are grateful." Her voice grew stronger. "But gratitude does not mean subservience. Humility does not mean weakness. We come to the galactic community with open hearts and open minds, but we also come with strength and determination. We will defend our values. We will protect our people. We will maintain our independence. Not because we distrust our new friends, but because we owe it to ourselves to stand on our own feet." She looked directly at Theron and the other alien delegates. "We hope you will see us not as junior partners or as threats, but as equals walking a shared path. We have much to learn from you. We hope we also have things to teach. Together we can build something greater than any of us could build alone. That is our hope. That is our promise. That is why we are here." The speech was met with thunderous applause from both humans and aliens. Theron found himself applauding as well. The old astronaut had articulated something important, something that captured the essence of humanity's approach to the galaxy. They were determined to be both humble and strong, both open and independent. It was a difficult balance, but they seemed committed to maintaining it. After the ceremony, Theron had a chance to speak with the astronaut. Her name was Elena Vasquez, and she had been exploring space when Theron was still a junior officer in the Calvaxian fleet. She was sharp-minded despite her age, with eyes that had seen wonders and horrors. "Your speech was moving," Theron said, "and very politically astute." Elena laughed. "I'm too old to worry about politics. I just said what I believe. We spent a long time preparing for this moment. We studied you, learned about you, built our strength. But all of that was just preparation. The real work starts now, building actual relationships, learning to work together, finding common ground while respecting differences." "You're not worried about conflicts?" Theron asked. "You've seen our debates in the council. There are many disagreements, many competing interests." "Of course I'm worried. I'd be a fool not to be." Elena looked up at the sky, though it was daytime and no stars were visible. "But I'm also hopeful. You know what I learned from decades of space exploration? The universe is dangerous and difficult. It doesn't care about us. We need each other. Humans, Calvaxians, Velprin, all of us. Together we're stronger, safer, better. That's worth working for." Theron felt something shift inside him. For the past year, he had been viewing humanity primarily as a political and military factor, a new power to be assessed and managed. But standing here, talking to this old explorer, he saw something else. He saw people who genuinely wanted to be part of something larger than themselves, who had built strength not out of aggression, but out of fear of being vulnerable, who wanted to contribute and participate and belong. "We have a saying in Calvaxian culture," Theron said slowly. "Roughly translated, it means, strength respects strength, but wisdom seeks understanding. I think I'm beginning to understand your people, Elena Vasquez." She smiled warmly. "And we're beginning to understand yours, Ambassador Theron. That's a good start." In the years that followed, Theron would often think back to that conversation. Humanity integrated into the Council more smoothly than anyone had predicted. There were bumps along the way, misunderstandings and minor conflicts, but overall the relationship worked. Human forces contributed significantly to Council security operations. Human scientists made breakthroughs that benefited everyone. Human diplomats proved skilled and reasonable. Most importantly, humanity demonstrated that their military power was genuinely defensive. They kept their word about not using it aggressively. When conflicts arose, they sought diplomatic solutions. When force was necessary, they used the minimum required. They became trusted partners in maintaining galactic peace. The human fleet that had arrived at Pinnacle 7 became something of a legend. Stories were told about it in military academies across dozens of species. The day humanity announced itself to the galaxy with overwhelming force and perfect precision. The day the established order realized a new power had emerged. But what many beings learned over time was that the fleet was only part of the message. The real message was more subtle and more important. Humanity wanted to be part of the galactic community, but only as equals. They had built the power to demand that equality, but they used that power responsibly. They were strong enough to stand alone, but wise enough to seek partnership. It was, Theron eventually decided, exactly the kind of species the galaxy needed, strong enough to contribute to stability, wise enough to seek cooperation over conflict, proud enough to maintain their identity, humble enough to learn from others. Sometimes, late at night in his quarters, Theron would pull up images from that first meeting. The human fleet floating in perfect formation. 1,000 ships, each one a promise and a warning. A statement of identity and capability. He had thought it was arrogance at the time. Now he understood it was something else entirely. It was humanity introducing itself honestly, saying, "This is who we are. This is what we can do. This is what we bring to the table. Take us seriously, treat us fairly, and we'll be the best partners you could ask for." The galaxy had taken them seriously, and in doing so had gained something valuable. A partner that was strong and capable. A civilization that understood both the necessity of power and the importance of restraint. A species that had looked at the vast, dangerous, beautiful universe and decided to face it with courage, preparation, and an open hand extended in friendship. Ambassador Theron had witnessed the moment humanity stepped onto the galactic stage. He had been offended, impressed, confused, and concerned. But most of all, he realized now, he had been privileged. He had seen history being made. He had seen the beginning of what would likely be one of the great civilizations of the galaxy. And he had played a small part in welcoming them into the community of stars. That was something to be proud of.